On today's episode of WatchJRGo, we are back in the shop for day 3 of the turbo install on the NC Miata. What is going on, guys? I am WatchJRGo, and today, like I said, we are back in the shop with the NC to take care of some of the more time-consuming projects on the turbo install, like cutting the catalytic converter and mounting a V-band flange to it so we can actually get it on the downpipe, which means the downpipe is coming up here in just a moment, and temporarily the oil feed line is hooked up. You can see it's not tight or anything. And I also installed the water inlet on the turbo right here. You put a crush washer in there and then just tighten it down with a 19. It's no big deal. A couple seconds of work to do the water inlet. And I'm pretty sure this just ends up going something like that when it's all finished. But we're not putting that on yet. We are gonna keep working down through the big hole right here, which is where we have to get the downpipe in, and we also have to get the catalytic converter mounted on that. So this is the V-band clamp flange. You can see V-band on this side, and then this side welds to the existing cat if you didn't order one. And Jesse actually tried to order the kit with everything, but apparently the cat's sold out before he could even get his in on the very first day. So unfortunately, we are reusing the stock one. It's not a big deal, but it probably adds a reasonable amount of time to the install. So I'm guessing it'll take a couple hours to get all that mocked up, tacked up, and then pull it all back off the car and weld it up. This is where the downpipe bolts to the turbo right there, and this is where the cat will end up being. So that gives you an idea of what that's gonna look like, and you can see there's an upper O2 sensor right there as well. The first thing on the menu before we weld up this exhaust is to finish getting the oil back into the engine, and the way Flyin Miata wants you to do that is right here. This screws into the oil pan, right? So you unthread the drain plug, you thread this in with a crush washer, and that gives you this AN fitting out here, and then you put this 90 on there, and then this hose goes from the bottom of the turbo, that pipe we installed yesterday, down to the 90, and that's how you get the oil back in the engine. So it does make oil changes a bit harder, but at the same time, it shouldn't be a big deal. You just have to take off 2 nuts instead of 1. If harder oil changes is the negative, the positive is you don't have to cut the oil pan, drill a hole, and install a bung or anything like that to return the oil into. So it is probably a massive time savings, and it also makes it much easier to get this job done at home. And we are back under the car again. You can see the oil return line dumping into the bottom of the oil pan right there. So that is all put together, AN fittings tightened down. You torque the AN to oil pan adapter to 20 foot-pounds, and then AN fittings should be very tight. That's the one thing I know after building a lot of stuff with AN. If you think it's tight, it can probably be tighter, and if it's not, it will probably leak. So be ready to bury connections like that. I have it reasonably tight, and I guess we'll find out on startup if it's gonna leak. Honestly, we should find out. Just sitting here, I did spray it with some brake clean, so there's residual oil in the engine, and if it's gonna leak, we should see it. Also, you can see the downpipe is in. To do that, you'll need to lift the engine. Again, I use the screw jack right there, lift it up this side of the oil pan, and then you go up with the downpipe, with the flange for the turbo facing this way. And then as you go up, you just kind of spin it, and then it just drops in place. So it's a little bit of a maneuver, but we got that in there, and it's time to go bolt it onto the turbo. And with the car back down on the ground, you can see the downpipe or the turbo outlet right here. We are ready to go work on the cat. There's just one more step. You can see the O2 sensor bung hanging out right underneath the wastegate rod there. It's time to put the primary O2 sensor back in. So I'm gonna paint a little anti-seize on there, and then we'll reinstall this guy, and then it's time to actually start getting the exhaust completely together. And by completely together, I mean cutting and welding for a solid hour. Here's where it gets irreversible. It is time to cut the manifold off of the factory cat, and we're gonna do that right now. I've got the grinder out here with a cutoff wheel, and basically you just jump in here and start doing some surgery. Cut above the weld and cut all the way around, and then we'll clean it up with a wire brush and go test fit it in the car. There it is, one factory Miata manifold separated from its factory cat so we can reuse this thing. So this is a huge cat, and I do think it probably flows pretty well. Shout out to Mazda for that. You can see where the O2 goes down there, and that's the honeycomb full of the platinum. Okay, here is our catalytic converter, and I just finished wire brushing the entire outer lip off, and this is gonna kind of sit on there roughly like that. We're gonna go mock it all up in the car, and then I'll put like 3 tack welds on here, and then we'll pull it off. We're gonna fill every bit of this with weld. So it's not gonna leak, but it's gonna take quite a while to get all this done. Well, the cat is in the mock-up position with its V-band adapter on top of it. And if we come over here, you can see that those marks we made earlier around those nuts are lined up with the nuts, and the bracket is back in place. So hopefully everything is set up correctly. So now for the fun part, we have to get the welder up inside here and put some tacks on this. At least, I mean, hopefully 3, maybe 2, but either way, we gotta get some tacks up inside there and then get it back down and start welding for real. Here's my newest notes on welding the V-band adapter onto the catalytic converter here so we can have a turbo compatible cat. Well, I don't think it said anything in the notes about this, but the V-band flange is stainless. And of course, if you're doing this at home, you probably don't have stainless wire. You might. I don't weld any stainless. And I, of course, just have standard solid core welding wire with 25-25 argon in there. And the tacks took. The first tack took beautifully. I threw the welder up in through the wheel well, put a tack on there, and I was like, beautiful. And then I got under the car to put a second tack in there, and it looks hideous. I'm gonna show you guys right now. This is that tack right there. Look how bad that looks. Just a splattery pile of garbage. And at first I thought it was because the gap is way too big to bridge. It's a huge gap. I mean, we're talking 1/8 inch. I was like, it's just material. It's something you can deal with. So I called my brother, the welding pro. As you guys know, he builds boilers and certified stuff for a living. So he would know what I needed to do on this. And I didn't want to bother him and have him come help me. I just wanted to know what's going on with my welds. My arc drops out every time I move through my E as I'm working downhill on this. And he was like, well, is it stainless? And I was like, I don't think so. So we talked about everything else, and then I went and got a magnet and stainless. So my game plan, and maybe your game plan if you're doing this at home too, is to try to keep the welder over here on the steel side and just pour the metal into the stainless. I mean, you can see I'm getting good bond. It's just not very pretty because like halfway through the welder shuts off and then picks back up and shuts off and picks back up. So I'm gonna try to add a little more angle, sneak it up in there, and just shove wire in there. And this time I'm probably gonna start there and then work this way. So pretty fun. It's not a pretty weld, but then again, it's also a weld that will never be seen again. And as long as it doesn't leak one bit and it lines up, I'm not gonna complain. But that's the first time I've ever tried welding stainless to carbon steel. The old Harbor Freight welder just holding it down. Never lets me down. I called my brother thinking I had a gas issue, but I've got, you know, unlimited gas. I don't know if I'll in my life run this bottle out. And we've got tons of pressure. Regulator has never changed. It just holds perfectly. I thought something was wrong, but I guess it's not. All right, guys, the cat package has been built. The heat shields have to be trimmed and they are back on. Again, ignore the welds not being the prettiest thing in the world. It is absolutely sealed. We made sure there were no holes in it. And I tried to stitch this up for a long time, probably put like 1.5 pounds of wire in there. You can actually tell the cat does weigh more. And it's sealed up, it's not gonna come apart, and it's not gonna leak. So mission accomplished there. Now, it's time to put this guy back in. I think we're ready to rock. All we have to do is put the V-band clamp on and put this bolt in, but I think we can kind of cheat and do this O2 sensor before the cat goes on, which will make it way easier to do. So I'm gonna double check, see if there's clearance, and if we can, we're gonna assemble this and move on. I think we can put the whole exhaust on right after this. So you do have to build the new cat support bracket. You're gonna replace that factory one. It has rubber isolation bushings on there that look really nice. And then from what I can tell, you put the rubber isolators in, you put in the little spacers right here, and then you drop these bolts in from the top like so. And then you flip this thing over and install the giant washers, just like so. Fender washers, so we'll try to put them on there the right direction. And now we can tighten all this up and we're ready to add it onto the bottom of the cat and bolt the cat onto the car for the final time. The exhaust is back under the car. Eric's here. He just helped me get the exhaust remounted. It sure is a lot easier if you have two people to get the exhaust in and out, but it is doable by yourself. I took it out by myself. Putting it back in though, always easier with another person. Now it's time to reinstall all the chassis braces here. So a couple seconds there, and we should have these have a torque spec, and it's 13 to 17 foot-pounds. So
you should probably just leave one loose at least.
yeah, we should leave one loose. Yeah, there's no doubt.
Just one.
Just plus weight savings, and it's automatic weight savings, which is the key to all of it, you know? Wow, those are tighter than I would expect. But I'm gonna guess they do add some chassis stiffness. I like how Flyin Miata called it out, probably because they spent so many years making chassis braces. We're just going to like 19, because that's what it hits instantly. 17, yeah. Right on the money. All right, hopefully we're done under here for a bit. We got the new oil filter on. Everything should be wrapped up. We're probably almost ready to fill the oil. So let's head upstairs and see what's next. Well, Eric has the fuel rail. This is kind of out of order, but I was thinking. Oh, we want another rag? Go for it. Bang, bang. Sure. We are dumping all the gas out of the fuel rail, and there is a ton in there. So we can pop these injectors off. So those are the factory injectors. And these are the new Bosch injectors here with new grease and 550cc injectors. So the tune's already sized for these. Everything's gonna work out very nicely, but two of the O-rings stayed in the intake's bosses. So I need to get in here with a tiny screwdriver and pry out those O-rings that stayed behind. So I'm gonna do that right now, make sure the bosses are nice and clean. I'll probably just stick the vacuum in there to get everything really cleaned out, and then we'll be ready to reinstall with the fresh injectors. We did blow these out with the air gun before we started, because I figured it would get all the dirt out of those holes, but didn't work out at all. It usually does, failed this time. Those guys should come right off. And I think once you pry on that clip, maybe it's stuck on the injector, but here, what if you just have two screwdrivers? Does that help? That way it's released on both ends. And then a wiggle.
And let me see.
All right, I'm gonna go grab those O-rings.
Okay.
This is what you call a dangerous game of operation right here. Nothing should happen, but. I don't want to knock the dirty old O-rings back in there. Eric's rolling out for the day. Mission accomplished. We just finished up the fuel rail while swapping out the fuel injectors here to the 550s. And now it's time to change the spark plugs since we're in here. So the coils are out. We're gonna do the spark plugs real quick, and that should wrap up all of this. I need to change the map sensor, which is hiding right back here. Literally, like, you can't see it, but it's right there. And once that's done, I think that's most of the sensor work, and back to hose routing after that. So we did run the heater core hose. It's right here. And it is a silicone hose that picks up the factory line, runs all the way to the back of the head, and goes down to the heater core outlet over there. And then we also finished the turbo water outlet right here, and it runs over here, and we haven't hooked it up yet, but it goes right there on the radiator with a T basically. So if you guys can see that, that's where it's gonna connect to the radiator. And this is the factory steam port, and it's gonna go right there after it gets shortened up. So, a lot of progress and still more work to do. It just doesn't end. The Miata had factory plugs in it. Look at that. LFJR18110s. There's a lot of Corona stain. I mean, we've seen plenty of worse plugs. These actually look like they burn really nicely, and that's not like a crazy amount of Corona stain. And this thing has nearly 100,000 miles on it as well. So that's a 10-year-old spark plug that's been rocking and rolling for a long time. So the new plugs already in, they are the rutheniums which are a little questionable. You know, they should last forever, but in turbo applications, we just throw plugs away pretty consistently, so I don't know how long the rutheniums will be in there. The factory gap is like 0.050 to 0.52. I did already re-gap the rutheniums with the special gap tool that doesn't bend that tiny little fine wire to 0.40, which is what the kit calls for. So we have the plugs properly gapped and installed, coils are back in, fuel injectors are hooked back up, we can keep working. I'm moving on to the map sensor. And we're really, at this point, just kind of getting everything done at once, because once I zip tie all these lines up, like I was just about to zip tie the water return back to the radiator here, once I do that, it's gonna be really hard to get in and out of the spark plug wells and the injectors and stuff. So I was like, let's get that done first, and then, you know, go back and finish up steps like routing this hose here. The coolant return from the turbo is finally connected back to the radiator. You throw a T in there and you add a whole lot of clamps, and then you intercept the factory line over here to the coolant reservoir. Now that that's all clamped down and finished up, all I have to do is zip tie this along to some lines to just kind of keep it neat as time goes on. So we'll add a couple zip ties in there, but we're also in the 3D printed section here. So if you notice the evap solenoid, where the sound tube used to hang on to that, we deleted the sound tube, of course. Now there's a 3D printed bracket right there that supports it. There's a 3D printed bracket holding the map sensor on, which I promise you guys, you cannot see, and it's incredibly hard to do. So you'll need a bunch of different tools and a T25 to do the map sensor, but a 3D printed bracket holds the new map sensor on, because the new sensor is a 2.5 bar for the turbo kit, and the NA one was probably a single bar sensor. Now, we have to do a lot of cutting over here, so I'm gonna go get the oscillating saw, and we're gonna make all of the cuts we have to do, because the power steering reservoir has to move way over here, right? So it's gonna come up and over. We have to cut out this, we have to cut out that, we have to cut out that, and then we have to cut out all of this. And once all of that has been moved out of our way, we can relocate our power steering reservoir. And after that, it's finally time to plumb the intercooler, the charge side, the filter side, all that fun stuff, and install our blow-off valve. And that's pretty much the end, especially since we've already got injectors, plugs, and map sensor done. I don't know if you guys noticed, this is a straight up Ford engine. It's got the Fomoco logo on it right there. The factory injectors, when we took them out, had Ford logos on them, and the new Bosch injectors also have Ford logos on them. So this is just a Mustang, I guess. Woo! All of the tricky stuff. I mean, this whole job, I want to throw a note in here. It's not, I don't think it's a driveway job. And I think most shops are going to charge you close to $10,000 in labor to install this thing, because it's just day after day. These, like this heater core hose here, is going to be a lot of work. If we don't have long needle nose, those are my long needle nose, the bent ones. I don't have super long needle nose, so it was really hard because of the clamp that's way down there. This one wasn't too bad, the steam port, but it's still a lot of work. It's just kind of work after work after work that ends up taking way longer than you thought because of clearance issues. I mean, I haven't had to go clearance anything to make room for the kit. There are, you know, little cuts you have to make, but I haven't had to beat any metal out of the way or anything like that like you used to in the SRT4 days. So it's a really, really nice kit. Nice kit or not though, you're either gonna put a lot of time in it or you're gonna spend a lot of money. Pick one. And the table is looking very, very empty at the end of day 3 here. Like I said, that's what's left. It's the charge piping and then the vacuum line for the blow-off valve there. And of course we have to tune it, but basically everything else is just intercooler install. Put the filter on it. I mean, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We are getting close.